Good morning, good evening, wherever you are around the world. My name's Tony Mark-Seymour, and we have a very special Noni by New Age Zoom call. We have a special guest from Denver, Colorado, Dr. Gerald Haase, on the call with us this morning, and I think you're going to be very, very impressed with our presentation. And let me just read just a short bio, and it's quite extensive, so I'll just give you a couple of lines. But Dr. Gerald Haase is a clinical professor of surgery at the University of Colorado School of Medicine and principal of Rocky Mountain Medical Research. He was the co-founder of Premier Micronutrient Corporation, a nutrical science research and development entity that was acquired by public company New Age Inc., which he is the chief medical officer. And I could go on and go on about Dr. Haase, but very, very impressive bio, Dr. Haase. So welcome to the call. Thank you very much for coming on this morning. Like I said, there is a picture of Dr. Haase with some students at the university, and looks like you've got a brain in your hand there, Dr. Haase.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Tony, and I'm glad to see some of your colleagues and friends from Australia, as well as I understand a couple from the United States. This will be fun. Basically, what we did was we were actually approached by the Department of Defense after the 9/11 terrorist attack in the United States because they were interested in the science that my partners and I had developed, and they actually offered us a fair amount of resources to develop products that would be protective against environments, disasters, terrorism, and the like. And over that length of time that we worked with the Department of Defense and with NASA, they actually gave us 12 million US dollars, which is quite a nice amount to develop all of these products. And that's where cell defense came out of. Cell defense is a particularly important product because it is very germane to today's life. We have environmental problems with not only air pollution and toxic chemicals and extreme weather and things of that nature, but we also have exposure with cell phone radiation, microwaves, ionizing radiation, and most recently, harmful microorganisms such as viruses and bacteria, which of course everybody is very familiar with. Now, the reason this is particularly relevant is because let's look at the disasters of the last 40 years, and they're in three categories. The first is radiation disasters. If you think back to 1979, the 3 Mile Island disaster in the US, now some 40 years later, we're seeing a high incidence of lung cancer, thyroid cancer, leukemia, and significant health problems. If you move to 1986, the Chernobyl accident in Russia, now some 30-some years ago, we are seeing birth defects and leukemias from that disaster. Now, of course, there was the terrorism disaster in the United States, in New York and Washington, D.C., 20 years ago, and we're now beginning to see lung disease and cancer in the first responders from that event. And of course, the two most recent weather disasters, 10 years ago in Fukushima, the tsunami, and we're beginning to see thyroid and blood diseases from that weather disaster. And of course, just this year, we've had this incredible weather disaster in Australia. And it's unknown what is going to be the effect of the air pollutants and toxins that came from that weather disaster and the long-term and short-term effects that that's going to have. So basically, with that background, cell defense is a very, very timely product to be available for people in many parts of the world. Talks about what are the the issues of these disasters and these environmental exposures. And basically what we're looking at is we're looking at something called excess free radical induced oxidative damage. And without getting too scientific, basically what happens is that these high energy exposures knock electrons out of their orbit, and they form these very highly charged molecules called free radicals. and they attack our body. They attack the DNA of our body, they attack the lipid membranes of all of our cells, and they attack the proteins in our body. So having an approach that is anti-oxidation and proven, as I will show you as we move along, is going to be very important. And at this point, I want to make something very clear. This is a perfect complement to the noni juice. As you know, noni, as a phytonutrient, has very, very strong antioxidant and anti-inflammatory actions. And in combination with the cellular defense, which has the same actions but different mechanisms. So basically, someone can take both products, take the juice as they take a juice, and then take the capsules, and they would get a double effect of oxidative damage reduction and inflammation reduction, as well as immune boosting, but by different mechanisms. So they work very well together, and they're very complementary. And now the next slide talks to us about why is it important? What are the issues? Well, the issues are that from exposure, whether it's electromagnetic radiation, whether it's air pollution, whether it's microorganisms, what happens is we're at risk. Multiple organ systems in our body is at risk for acute health effects. Radiation sickness, for example, would be one, but also chronic diseases, heart disease, neurologic disease, diabetes, and heritable and genetic changes in our cells and our children, as well as early aging. So this product is very, very germane to the important things that occur in our life. The next slide is just, I think, something that is really nice to know, is that basically this is a very well patented product. In other words, we're not going to have to worry about people stealing it from us, and a pretty elegant science and nicely patented. Let's start to talk about what are the studies in cell defense. You have to start with animals. So what we did was we looked at a series of different animals, different sizes, and we started with fruit flies. I don't know if you remember the Drosophila from your high school genetics, blonde hair and brown hair, or brown eyes and blue eyes, all of that genetic stuff. Well, you're able in fruit flies to alter their genetics. And what that means is we can put a gene into the fruit fly, and if the gene is called a Hoptoom gene, it doesn't really matter what the name is, but basically what it does is that sets up the fruit fly to have a propensity to getting tumors. And if you use proton irradiation on these fruit flies, they'll all get a leukemia, lymphoma type tumor, which is easy to see on their body. Now, the fruit flies feed on the water. So what we did was take our formulation and put it in droplets in the water for half the fruit flies. And what we found was absolutely dramatic. It actually blocked the tumor effect of the radiation. So the flies that were protected did not get the tumors, while the flies that were unprotected did get the tumors. And this was the first demonstration that a genetically directed tumor could be stopped with our formulation. We then gave a very high dose of radiation to mice, which would be lethal to them. 100% of the mice die, but we were able to save almost half the mice by just giving them our formulation and no other protection.
Dr. Haase, can I ask a question? So
yeah.
This we were protecting from ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. Is this what you're saying? It's some sort of protection from both forms of radiation?
Yeah. The biggest difference is, mechanisms of action for non-ionizing radiation would be forms of radiation like electromagnetic radiation, microwaves, cell phones, mobile phone towers, things of that nature. But the mechanisms of action work through free radicals and inflammation. So even though the thing that turns it on is different, one is ionizing radiation and the other is non-ionizing, the end product and the mechanism that causes the damage is the same. And that's why this will work for both exposures. Does that answer the question?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
We're able to get a very well-known radiation biologist, Mike Kuffner, at the University of Nuremberg-Erlangen, to look at human DNA. What Dr. Kuffner has is a very sophisticated assay looking at something called a histone variant, which actually marks with a chromophobe marker DNA damage, double-strand DNA breaks. Why are they important? The reason that they're important is because these double-strand breaks are the first change in the body, both with the break and the repair of the break, to cause cellular change, mutagenesis, causing abnormalities in the cells and the tissues and leading to carcinogenesis, cancer. So basically, if you can protect human DNA, you're really at the forefront of protecting against the adverse health effects of these hazardous exposures. So what Dr. Kuffner did was first do an in vitro study. He got that approved because of the animal data that I just showed you. And the in vitro study, he got 25 volunteers to give blood samples. And then we put their blood samples into cell cultures and then irradiated the cell cultures, half of them unprotected and the other half not protected. And what we found was really exciting. It turns out that we were able to reduce the DNA damage in this in vitro study in the cells in the laboratory. Now the next slide. And this is really the sort of the real important slide. We then did an in vivo study where we actually gave 25 volunteers our product. They actually took it orally, just like we all do. And then we drew their blood and irradiated it. And what we found was really, really earth-shaking. Within 15 minutes of taking the formula, there was a 30% reduction in DNA damage, which you can see on the slide from the baseline. Within half an hour, there was a 45% reduction in DNA damage, and after an hour, there was a 60% reduction in DNA damage. Next slide. And so basically, the takeaway message from this part of the lecture on enhanced cell defense is, and this had never been shown before, this is the first demonstration ever that an orally taken micronutrient formulation could reduce human DNA damage, proven, by 60%. And that's people who actually took the product and then had their DNA analyzed. So I think that with that sort of background, we can then go to the next slide. And basically, what can people say about our cell defense? And I want to make one thing really clear. We make no claims on diseases. We make no claims on cures. What we do say is that this proprietary patented formulation supports health, supports cells, was done in collaboration with very credible researchers from the US Department of Defense and NASA, sustains cellular integrity after environmental exposures, and specifically addresses the three most important areas of effect that we want to look at. That is, decreasing excess free radical induced oxidative damage, decreasing inflammation, and enhancing and supporting immune function. And all three of those are critical for the current environment and the hazardous environment in which we live, especially now with microorganisms, viruses, and everything else. Last slide on this section is the safety slide. In all of our studies, as well as all of our anecdotal experience with people taking this product, there's no side effects, no adverse side effects, other than some very mild indigestion from some people who have never taken this high level of an antioxidant before. And if that's the case, they just have to decrease the dose a bit, and it takes a couple weeks to get used to it. But other than that, there's no contraindication and there's no interaction with any other medications. Why is this important? It's important because it allows us to make this product available to virtually everybody. On the occupational side, people, for example, who are first responders, police, fire, EMTs, doctors, nurses, people who work in hospitals, people in the aviation industry where they're exposed to radiation, people in government positions where they're exposed, military, people in construction or manufacturing where they're exposed to toxic chemicals. And certainly for many of us that are business people, frequent flyers, people who are always in the air and getting exposed, also smokers, and in fact, residents in congested urban areas with the air pollution that we have, or people who live near power plants. So virtually everybody can benefit from this product.
Okay, that comes to the end of our Zoom call. I want to thank you once again for coming on the call this evening, your time. Really, really appreciate it. Hopefully everybody on the call has got some valuable information to make an educated decision whether to give this product a go. We can order this product through Noni by UH if people want to try this product. Like I said, it is available. Speak to the person who invited you on the call to get more details. Thanks once again, Dr. Haase.